it was a good weekend for international sport outside perhaps the typical that we know of in Canada here. So Ryder Cup, which is maybe it's gone too far. We saw what Rory McIlroy, his response, by the way, was brilliant, I thought, but it did go a little bit too far. At what point does hooliganism start encroaching golf, which might be make it more worthwhile watching? I don't know, but it was. You think it has? Did they go too far, Craig? I mean, I don't really watch much golf, but Ryder Cup the last few years it's changed, but this weekend especially, it's a little bit vociferous to say the least.
Yeah, I would say it did cross the line. We talk about football. I mean, it's a different level, but we kind of have grown to accept what the football fans are. But in golf, it's different. I mean, when you're playing golf, you grow up playing golf. It teaches you a lot of things. It doesn't teach you. I think it exposes character as opposed to building character. It tells a lot about a person when you play with somebody, but there's an etiquette to golf, and they're supposed to be above the average football fan, if you like, and how you treat people and how you respect the game. And I think they lost that respect for the game. And it's interesting because, I mean, it was $750 US for a ticket just to get in. They're really, really expensive. So, you know, it's a predominantly white, aggressive crowd. And it's quite disgusting, quite honestly.
Hooliganism is very much a white sport too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we got a white problem.
Yeah. Really do. Wonger, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you. You have a white.
You have a white.
No, well, this leads me.
Yeah.
I've been trying so hard to lose weight, Dubs, and get in shape, and she throws that
you're
out.
fancy your new shirt.
You
Come on, your old
mentioned
shirt,
it
sorry.
yourself.
No, you get your CBC hair out of here. This leads me into. Can I ask my question then? Because it had to do with the Ryder Cup, and then I'll go. But it's basically the behavior of the Ryder Cup fans was over the line. I would agree with Kreger. The big question for me was, because it was in the States, it's your fans, has something ever made you feel ashamed from one of your teammates or one of your clubs, like executives or even your fans, where you went, I didn't want to, like, hold your head in embarrassment? Has that ever happened? I'll start with you, Craig.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, going back to 98, after the World Cup and David Beckham and the stick that he was getting after being sent off, and he turned into the villain. And everywhere he went in England, he was getting absolutely destroyed. But the West Ham fans, it was the first game of the season, I believe, in 98 at West Ham. And he just took absolute abuse the whole game. And I thought that was out of line. I thought that stepped over what you should be allowed to do. And it was just like it was just sideways disgusting. And he talked about it in his documentary as well. How much?
You mean your documentary?
Yeah, yeah. But it was a lot. And
is there an example? Like, do you remember any?
They had a guy in the stands, a noose, like an effigy, and he's being.
They did. There was a noose held up in the crowd, and Victoria was getting it as well.
Well, she deserved it, though. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. A lot of nasty stuff. Yeah.
Well, like Rory McIlroy's wife getting a beer thrown at her, right?
Well, you know what? Yeah, she did. But I tell you, if you look, I've seen it in slow motion, and somebody posted this. That the guy was holding a beer and somebody comes around the side and he whacks it right out of the person's hand.
So annoying.
So the person with the beer did not throw it, and the other person just snatched it out of the hand.
There was a second spitter.
Yeah. Exactly.
Confirmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a bunch of chaos around that, but it was it looked worse than.
Didn't DiCanio have some things on the pitch that you could have held your head on, or were you stayed away from that stuff?
When he went to Lazio, he did the Nazi salute, which is probably
Nazis. Yeah.
It was frowned upon back in those days.
Yeah, it's frowned upon, right? Like, I mean,
not anymore.
No. Depends where you are, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, sadly.
Jimmy, did you have anything? Did you ever have a home team or colleague, a teammate on the pitch where you went, oh,
Yeah,
and I
no,
know it's a
think-
tough line, but
yeah, teammates or managers or even opposition that you're playing against, and I think we all know, how difficult it is playing at a high level and what goes on behind the scenes. And sometimes when you see a player whose confidence is down, things aren't going well for them, and then the fans just hurling abuse, sometimes you feel bad for the individual or even an opposition player or a manager. There's times where you get on great with your manager and things just aren't clicking on the pitch, but you know how hard the manager's working, and the fans are all singing, you're getting sacked in the morning. And I mean, it's brutal sometimes. You just think, Jesus.
They were chanting that this weekend, apparently, to the American captain, the Brits who were there. They were chanting, "You're getting sacked in the morning," and after the Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
That's clever.
Yeah, that's another thing. We talk about coaches in football and in other sports. You got a captain, Keegan Bradley's the captain of the U.S. team, and they're blaming him for pairings and matchups and things like that. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, the Americans didn't play poorly in the Ryder Cup, and they were great yesterday, but they didn't play poorly. The Europeans were on fire, They were setting records that we've never seen before, 32 under. It's just crazy numbers that they're posting. And it's not about the manager and the captain who's doing it. It's about the players on the pitch or the players on the course. Nothing to do with the captains. Although when you're saying stuff like, we're going to kick the Europeans' ass and all this kind of stuff beforehand, you're pumping them up.
But that's normal. That's a normal thing.
That's
to
normal.
Say. Yeah,
that's normal.
And I was thinking about your Keegan Bradley and his pairings. He shouldn't have put that Riesling with a dark red meat. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have served it with steak. Get him the.
How uppity are you this morning, by the way, with your fucking fancy background?
Yeah,
know,
it is
look
buttoned up.
Ew.
Bougie. I'm bougie.
Yeah.
Where do you summer?
Yeah.
Dubs, what about you? Did you ever have a moment?
Gaston, please. Gaston.
Wong just does up the top button. He changes character entirely to this tough.
He looks smart.
Yeah. Hey, Dubs, what about you? Any embarrassing moments? Coaches, teammates?
Shameful?
And if you say no, then it was probably you.
No, not during my career, but I can count at least
Podcast.
3 or 4. Yeah, no, not podcast either. But now as a mom, as a parent of kids in sport, coaching soccer, having to rein in my own parents. Forrest, you're talking about decorum and, that sense of respect that's supposed to be built in to the fabric of a sport like golf, say. And that is obviously tied in with society and classes and elitism and the sport only being accessible to privileged white individuals largely, right? But a sport like soccer, that's meant to be the antithesis of that, and having to tell my parents, you can only encourage. You are here to cheer on your kid. I don't want you to coach them. I don't want to hear you shouting instructions from the sideline. And you're certainly not to speak to the referee nor to the opposition. How embarrassing is that? And 3 or 4 times since Jack started playing, so Jack's 15 now, since he started at the age of 6, I remember one time in particular at a hockey tournament in Montreal East, having the twins maybe 2 or 3 years old. So not being around Jack and his games and his practices as much as I would have wanted to because of my duties as a mom to these small children who is not an ideal scenario to be kind of cooped up at an arena. But everything that's bad about sport and the fans and the parents being overbearing and trying to live vicariously through their kids seems to be, accelerated or made worse by the fact that it's self-contained in a rink. The behaviors might be comparable, but it's just exacerbated by the fact that you're hemmed in and everybody's on top of one another in an arena. And I had to tell a man as who was coming to the defense of his son who had been plowed into the boards. It was a terrible play. There was no malice in it. It was accidental. And the referee is like 14 years old. And this guy who was already 6'3", like this huge man, standing over the glass, berating the referee, and the parents getting all lathered up and behind him and pointing and gesticulating. Somebody who had a Facebook Live of the whole fucking thing. And with Evie and Campbell, 18 months or 2 years old, JP, my husband's the coach, but there's nothing to do with it. And I had to stand up on the bench and to yell at this man and say, what is the matter with you? Sit down. Like, this is not the way to conduct yourself. And like in French, and I was emotional. I was like, basically like, what the fuck is the matter with you? Yeah, like, get yourself in check. So I've had to do that like 5 or 6 times over the course of my kids' playing careers. Like, what are we doing here? So like that type of behavior at the Ryder Cup, whether it's Donald Trump or otherwise, and our culture and people feeling like they have the green light to behave this way. Whereas before they were these faceless, nameless keyboard warriors, like soccer fan 736. And now it's fucking John McRae who lives down your street, who is unabashedly doing this in public, whether you're a fan at the Ryder Cup or you're at your kid's hockey game. It's an embarrassment. Sorry, that turned into a little bit of a rant.
Well, there is a lack of civility, and civility is what we used to bring, because you walk into a situation and you give people respect, whatever that respect, for kids, for across the board. It was funny. We were with Charlie, JC, and I had wings with his beautiful wife Mel and his wonderful daughter, and Charlie was being a little noisy, and someone complained and you're like, we were at a Gabby's. We were at a Monday bar where it's chicken wings are on half price. And there was like 3 or 4 other kids. There were some kids dancing, and Charlie was a little excited, and someone complained about the noise. And you're like, what is wrong with you? You can't complain at a pub. If you go somewhere where it's supposed to be quiet and it says children under 12, please,
what about
muzzle
men
them
over 50?
Are you sure it was Charlie? And
I
it
was
wasn't,
gonna say.
it wasn't you?
Yeah, very recently, in fact. The same thing happened,
Indian.
but
It wasn't an
child.
Indian place.
Excuse me, sir. The level of your voice is
Yeah, I
bothering
think it was
us.
Wonger, actually. It had nothing to do with Charlie.
Yeah,
The restaurant next door is complaining.
It could have been. It could have been.
Did they specifically mention the child? They
No,
didn't,
you're
did
right.
No,
They didn't.
right.
They didn't say.
It
They were
was you.
complaining about our table.
I will say this. I mean, yes, football games, we see it every weekend on the TV. You see the people giving the wanker sign and spitting out this venom towards guys taking corners or throw-ins. But there's also an element of banter at football matches that, yes, goes too far, but it can be quite clever as well. Whereas what I saw this weekend at the Ryder Cup, it was just idiots just dropping F-bombs for the sake of it.
Well, and also within his swing, Sharms, that was the problem.
Right. The backswing.
It was within his, that anything before that, you can kind of go, okay, we'll let that go. But it's when they're doing the making weird noises, all that kind of stuff during. I know that was a little masturbatory.
Masturbatory.
Yeah, where Roy was putting once too, and he refused to putt until they quieted down.
That's right. Well, Craig, when you gave the wanker sign, was it to the Ipswich fans, your own fans?
Yeah, it was my own fans, yeah.
What did they say? What did they say? Because it was in the newspaper. I tried to look it up and find it. I'm going to have to go microfiche back into my research.
That's years ago.
Yeah, exactly. What were they saying to you that triggered you to give the wanker sign, or made you feel strong enough to go, fuck them?
Well, we're having a bad time, and the game wasn't going particularly well. I remember that. And the Ipswich fans were moaning, and the one end of Ipswich, Churchman's stand, they had a reputation for being not the boisterous or chanting group. That's at the other end of the stadium, just sort of older, moaning Ipswich fans, and they were just on top of us all the time, and not so much myself, but just the whole team. And yeah, so I put my hand behind my back and gave him the wanker sign. And my God, they lost their minds. Like they're just like they could do it and say anything to you, but oh my God, like I crossed like that's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like come on.
So true.
Spare me.
Must be in times on the pitch though, you're just so furious with the teammate. I saw this weekend it was the United Brentford match, which is great by the way. But there was a raking diagonal ball, I think by Luke Shaw to Bruno. It was a brilliant pass, and it was spot on. And Bruno just made a complete hash of it. Couldn't control it. It went out for a throw-in. And usually you see the recipient like giving the order, thanks. That was the. Instead, he looked so pissed off, and he's pointing forward like where he wanted the ball because it was the wrong pass. And I mean, that kind of teammate used to drive me up the freaking wall. When they couldn't acknowledge that, yeah, I kind of made the mistake. It was my fault. It's on me. He wasn't that guy. And I thought, how popular or unpopular must he be in the room after those kind of incidents? There must have been teammates that you had that just guys you just didn't like or girls you didn't like in the room. They just pissed you off and rubbed everyone the wrong way. Dubs, was there anyone? Without naming it. Oh, there is. Yes, there was.
She's zipping it up right now.
There always is. There's always one. On the national team, we were really lucky, but in the club game, like where it's like all about that person and all about their ego and how they look, and that's no fun. And they're usually also the kind of that wart and that, I don't like this expression, but like that cancer in the locker room when they're called out for it, and then you still have to live with them. So it's like, as a captain, as somebody in that leadership group, weighing the outcome of addressing said behavior, right? Because sometimes it's better to address it quietly and try to rein it in. But then you realize as you get older and you gain that experience that it's usually not something that can be taken care of. Like, this is behavior that's allowed to continue, and they've been coddled, and usually because they're talented and they're a goal scorer, or doesn't have to be a striker, but they just have that personality, that character where they're very, very selfish, and it's not about the team, it's just about them. But sometimes I was just like, call them out, whether it was on the pitch or whether it was in the locker room in front of everybody. And I knew that it was going to end badly, but it was fucking worth it.
What did you say? Because we don't know who the person is, because we obviously don't want to betray confidences in locker rooms. But what did you have to say to this person, or not just this person, to the team while you were addressing this person's behavior?
Well, it was just calling a simple behavior out that was just, you had a specific task and role to play defensively, and you chose to shirk your responsibility another time or again, and I'm fucking sick of it. And so if you're going to show up, yes, it's about, in possession and when we have the ball, but you have responsibilities and a role to play that is owing to us and to the responsibility and to the collective. And you're consistently not showing up, in less words and with more swears.
Do the name
and then you have that in the dressing room, and then you also have, like, for example, what Onana has taken at Manchester United. I mean, he's had an absolute nightmare, really, and everybody would probably agree with that. But he doesn't deserve the abuse that he's getting. He's not trying to make mistakes. He's trying to play football, and it's sideways, really, but the abuse that the guys get.
But there's this abuse and there's mistakes that players make. But when they go out of their way to remonstrate, to be petulant with their teammates, that's a different level. Jimmy, was there anyone that you can think of? You don't need to name names, but I'd love it if you could.
No, I mean, like at the club level, I was lucky. I had a lot of great dressing rooms and good individuals that were in place, but for the most part, everybody was on the same page and good people. So I don't think there really was an individual that I hated at club level.
But there were moments, though, surely. I mean, on the pitch, then you're like pissed off.
No, of course, on the pitch, all the time it happens, because you demand a standard, some games guys aren't performing, and we all go through it. and players will have a dig at you when you're kind of not into a match, but it's expected. I've had players call me out. I've called players out. It's just because you want to win. You demand a certain standard, and it's part of the game, calling each other out when someone's not performing. It's because you want to win. You want to win. It's professional football. There's a lot at stake at every single match. So
yeah, you don't take it personally.
You can't take it personal.
Yeah.
But as a coach, though, ideally you want the team to self-police itself as well, right? Do you, as a coach, Jimmy, when you were at York, was there times where a player was not fulfilling his duties or whatever, and the team knew that, but you were fine to let the team deal with that in the room?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
have a go. I mean, but you don't cross the line,
right?
And but you have to have those players that are out in the pitch, and they govern the game, they police it, they call people out when things aren't right. But sometimes when it does get heated and they start going toe to toe, that's when you jump in. You say, okay, enough's enough now.
Mm-hmm.
I often found too the same players who would act the way that Bruno did there, where like arms raised and really remonstrating and very obviously making it about the other person, like pointing the finger, were very often the same players who you couldn't point the finger at, like to say like you've done this wrong, like you need to be better, like Jimmy's saying, like there's a certain standard here, we demand more from you. And then they would also take it personally. It wouldn't be forgotten. They would hold a grudge. They would be kind of like childish, and their behavior would change, and then somebody would have to go after them and speak to them, and they would have to be managed. And then that was more kind of emotional energy on, that the team had to control, or the manager had to control. And there was just like more time spent on them. And then that's really what they were after too, is they wanted to be the center of attention. It was never about the team. It was always about them.
I've had managers as well, right at the beginning of the season, tell the players, I don't want to see those antics on the pitch with you flapping your arms, you're blaming other people, because there's going to be a time where you give a bad ball. And we always say, like, turn a shit pass into a good pass, meaning help out your teammate.
Right.
Because if you help them out, they're going to help out you. You mess up. And so if you as a manager set the tone early doors of what you expect, then normally that stops all the nonsense.
Good conversation.